Thank you very much, all of you, for being here, and the most eminent panel that I can be with, the chair, Ms. Semanthani, Professor Elizabeth, eminent journalist, somebody I've known for very long for his madverse thoughts, Madhavan Narayanan, the organizers for having us, and for talking about women's reservation as it should be spoken about. Thank you all of us. Whatever I say over the next 10, 15 odd minutes, I will wear both hats. I am a woman. I do believe there are many more of us needed in policy making, but I also represent a political party. I am from the Indian National Congress. And perhaps what I say will come with a political slant, but I will try and keep it as neutral as possible for women. First of all, it's heartening to be in a room where women are in majority and men in micro-minority. So give yourselves a huge round of applause. It's a rarity. I go for a lot of conclaves, I go to a lot of places. You know, I spot women here, there, very, very few, but it's good to be in a room which has so many women. The pit side of being the second speaker who feels as passionately about women as Professor Elizabeth does is that I will perhaps be repeating some of the statistics, but I will spend very little time on it because she's already taken you through what we want to talk about. So let's just wake up and realize where we are and what is the big deal and how much dishonesty there is even in the women's reservation that we are being offered 36 years after it was first mooted upon. Yes, 36 years it took for the first draft bill to come and finally for this to be a reality. And kid you not, this will not be a reality before 2034. That's the rider it comes with. That is the kind of dishonesty that is served to women of this country, and it's important we realize that. We are treated as a vote bank. Every political party, including mine and various others, you know, everybody wants to chase the woman voter. Everybody wants to talk about half the country's population. And where are we? So let's first talk about the world around us. And if you can please take me to the first slide. This is the world around us. And I will just quickly take you through the broad figures so that we know exactly what we are talking about. The Global Gender Gap Report 2023 says countries like India, Turkey and China, we are in this glorious company by the way, have less than 7% ministers, people on decision-making capacity. We'll come to representation in just a bit. Only 27 countries in the world today are led by women. 107 countries have never had a woman leader, including the great and the mighty United States of America. So give yourselves a round of applause because we've had women leaders, we have women like you, we've had a woman prime minister, we have a second woman president. There are countries that dictate terms to the world, or at least they think they do. They've never elected a woman to their office. They did not even give women voting rights to begin with. But that's the harsh reality. Globally, representation of women in parliament is 27%. We make up for half the world's population, but all over the world, and I'm only putting global figures because we'll talk about India next, 27%. And gender parity, which means as many number of women as men in parliaments all over the world, will not be achieved for the next 39 years. So you are going to go away, I'm going to go away, our next generation is going to go away, the generation after that is going to go away, and hopefully at some point of time, almost 40 years later, there will be gender parity. That's what has been done to women. I feel very strongly about it, so sorry if I'm emphasizing a lot on lower representation. You know, Professor Elizabeth spoke about Rwanda, and one will have to refer to Rwanda because the 2003 Constitution Amendment there mandated 30% reservation for women, and 10 years later, women occupy 64% of their seats in parliament. That's what affirmative action does. So when somebody tells you to be sheepish about it, and I'm going to talk about that next after these numbers, in 2024, 63 countries are going to go to polls. About 1.6 billion people will vote, including the United States of America. Let me see if they'll have the guts to choose or to reject a person by the virtue of her gender. The best person should be elected to office, but America is going to polls, and the big talking point there is, can they eventually come around to electing a woman leader? The next slide, please. This is Indian politics, and I think Professor Elizabeth spoke about this, so I'm going to cursingly just give you two numbers. We have 74 women MPs in the Lok Sabha, 39 in the Rajya Sabha, which is 13.6% representation in the Lok Sabha, 16.8% in the Rajya Sabha, and India ranks 149th out of 193 nation as far as women MPs are concerned. I want you to just see the second point here. You know, Lok Sabha is an election which is very competitively fought. Politics is considered a male bastion. Is winnability going to happen if you pose a woman candidate? But what about the Rajya Sabha? You know the outcome. You know exactly who's going to win. And this is to political parties across the spectrum. You know exactly the candidates who are going to win. Why is this number not higher? This isn't about winnability. This is about will. That's the brute reality. It is not about winnability. We've been told for decades that, you know, women perhaps not meant for politics. Why not? So this is not about winnability. Political parties may tell you, and I represent a political party, that women may have low winnability and so there are fewer women candidates. In Rajya Sabha, you know exactly the number of women, exactly who's going to be elected. You know the outcome of an election. Why is the 16.8% not higher then? The next slide, please. And this is where I want to spend 2 minutes on. Why are we talking about reservation? And I think I can't make a more passionate call for affirmative action. It needs to happen. For far too long, women have been made to feel sheepish. Women have been made to feel embarrassed. Women have been made to explain that we need a level playing field, which is what reservations will do. So when men turn around and say, you want to compete with us in the world, but you want reservations? Oh yes, we do. Because you have made the entry barrier so high that we can't get in. Which is why we need the level playing field to be built. We need to break down the barriers. We need to lower the barriers so that more and more women can get in. So when somebody turns around, and this happens very often, and asks me, you know, you talk about women equality and then you need reservations. Absolutely I do. Because for centuries, we've been kept out and we've been told, you cannot get in. You know, this is a male bastion. No, it is not. Everything, every policy that our parliament makes impacts men as well as women. We need to be stakeholders on the table. And no, we don't just need to be health ministers or ministers of women and child development. We need to be ministers, we need to be MPs where hardcore policy making is happening in finance, in defense, in commerce, everywhere. Because whatever policy is being made is impacting you, me, and our generations to come. And which is why affirmative action is required. So the next time somebody turns around and asks us, you know, you talk about women equality, and here you want reservations? Absolutely I do. Because some of you need to be thrown out for the others to make way in. And which is why it's required. I want to just spend 2 seconds to talk about the 30% reservation. You know, this was an affirmative action, 1/3 reservation in our Panchayati Raj. And guess what it did? There are about 30 lakh elected representatives. Almost 30 lakh elected representatives at the Panchayat level institutions. At the Gram institutions, the blocks, there are 30 lakh elected representatives. And almost 40% of them today are women because there is reservation. Because we took affirmative action, because those entry barriers were lowered. And which is why affirmative action is required, because you need more women to be a part of policy making. You need more women on the table. We are not some cosmetic items that, okay, here's the voter list that has come, or here's the list of our candidates. And you know, we've got 2-3 women. We are not cosmetic. We are real. We want a seat on the table. We want to be heard. We will decide the policies that also impact us as much as the men do. Can we go to the next slide, please? The next slide gives you a brief history of the Women's Reservation Bill and how we have come to where we have come. And yes, everybody has contributed in keeping this at bay. I am not saying everybody has contributed to women's reservation. I am saying everybody has contributed to somehow keep us away, and that's the conspiracy against half this country's population. It began, like I said, in 1988. That was the first time the idea of women's reservation in our legislatures was mooted. So don't celebrate. We must not get up and applaud, wow, we have a women's reservation finally. A, you don't, because it's going to take you another 15 years to have it, or if not more. But don't get carried away. There has been a consistent effort to not let this happen, and which is why from the first time it was mooted, 36 years it has taken for this to become a reality. You have this on the stage, so I'm not going to repeat it. 1988, when it was first mooted by the National Perspective Plan. Then consequently, there was 73rd and 74th Amendment made. While that amendment was made, I want to tell you 2 or 3 things here. Of course, there were reservations for ST, STs, no reservation for OBCs. Political realities have changed since then, and which is why we are insisting on that. In 1989, when Rajiv Gandhi tabled it in Parliament, this bill passed the muster of the Lok Sabha. It got defeated in the Rajya Sabha. And I will wear my political hat because I feel very strongly about it. One of your legal luminaries, Mr. Ramjet Malani, voted against this. Atal Bihari Vajpayee voted against this, L.K. Advani voted against this, and so did Jaswant Singh. So today when my opponents want to get up and take credit, well, you stalled it way back in 1989, otherwise it would have been a reality, and there would have been many more women in Parliament today asking for their voices to be heard, deciding policy, and deciding the course of this country. So those are the kind of people who opposed women's reservation. I'm not demeaning them, I'm not defiling them, but I'm just saying some of the tallest political leaders in this country have opposed women's reservation. Of course, like Professor Elizabeth mentioned here, it became a reality with Narasimha Rao government in 1993 finally having this passed. The proof of the pudding is in eating. 40% elected representatives in Panchayati Raj are women. There will be those naysayers who will turn around and say, you know what, what is a Gram Pradhan called in Karnataka? The Gram unit, the village unit. The head of that village unit, I come from UP, is called a Pradhan. And there was a position that was devised called Pradhan Pati, the husband of the Pradhan, because that seat was reserved for women. It's all right. I'm willing to live with this as long as the name on paper and the board outside is of a woman, because that too will eventually change. Her daughter or a daughter-in-law is going to be different. Her daughter or a daughter-in-law is also going to have her name and not just her husband's name on that nameplate. So I'm okay with that. And I think that's a societal change, and it will change. Let's spend 2 seconds to talk about the fact that Women's Reservation Bill was also mooted upon, if you can go to the next slide please, by the UPA government. In 2008, on 6th May, it was tabled in the Rajya Sabha, and it was tabled in the Rajya Sabha for a reason. And my colleague, our MP here, Amiben is here, and she's going to tell you, Rajya Sabha is a permanent house. Bills don't lapse there, and which is why it was tabled in the Rajya Sabha. And yes, I am embarrassed, I am ashamed, but men from across the political spectrum, including our allies, were opposed to this. But I tell you, the conspiracy against us is not just hatched by our opponents, it's also hatched by men within. Because men would want to keep those entry barriers very, very high. So 2008, it was tabled in the Rajya Sabha. 5 out of the 7 recommendations made by the Geeta Mukherjee Committee of 1996 were included in this. This legislation was sent to the Standing Committee. 2010, the Union Cabinet approved it, and in 2010, on March 9th, a day after International Women's Day, it was eventually passed in the Rajya Sabha by a 186 to 1 vote. I'm glad the House of the Elders didn't disappoint us. But Lok Sabha did. It could not see the light of day. This bill was because it was introduced in the Rajya Sabha, it continued to be. And we kept telling the government of the day that you bring this bill and you will have our unflinching support. I want to now go to the bill that has been brought in. I laud the fact that women's reservation bill is now a reality. Can we go to the next slide, please? I laud the fact it is a reality. It's now called the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam Bill. For those of you not very familiar with the Hindi name of the bill, Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam. And I will tell you, my fellow women, I will tell you, my fellow fighters, there's never been a greater conspiracy against women other than putting them on the pedestal and calling us Devis and calling us mothers and sisters and great daughters and not recognizing that we are women. We are stakeholders. We are equal participants. I have exactly the same vote that my friend Madhavan Narayanan here does. I am as impacted by policy by as a gentleman sitting here. So yes, I am the fairer sex, I am the better sex, I am the more able sex, I agree with that, but I am an equal. Don't put me on a pedestal because you want to deny me the opportunities, and which is why I have a problem with the name of this bill. It's a reality, all right, but Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam essentially means salutation to the women power. Don't salute us. Give us a seat on that table. That's what we want. We don't want your salutations. We want to be celebrated for being equal citizens of this country. We want to be respected. We want to be safe. We want to have equal say. Don't put us on a pedestal because the conspiracy is to deny us a position on that table that will take decisions. That's the reality, which is what I have a problem with this tokenism. The whole idea of this bill that was brought in, and that's my problem with this bill, is to somehow paint this whole thing as glorifying women and saluting women, and there will be more women in parliament. Please, no. We don't need to be celebrated to be in parliament. We need to be in parliament and in state legislatures because we goddamn make half the country's population. We are the vote bank that you chase, and which is why we need to be elected. That's the simple difference in how I see women's reservation and what has now been thrust upon us. And this women's reservation, by the way, comes with conditionalities, something again that has been referred to here, and which is why I will make a very brief reference to it. What are the two conditionalities? That this is going to come into effect after census and after delimitation. We can go to the next slide perhaps. I've already spoken about 128th Amendment here. These are the riders it comes with. Women's reservation will be implemented after the 2026 delimitation. But the 2026 delimitation itself will happen after the census. The census which has not happened since 2019. And may I also just spend a minute to tell you that the last delimitation commission headed by Justice K.K. Gupta submitted its recommendations 14 years after the 1981 census. It took them 14 years after a census to present a delimitation report. So we don't know when the census will be because this government doesn't believe in census. Countries the world over have done census after Corona, we haven't. When the census will be, it is safe to say it will take at least 10 years after that to do delimitation, and only after that will there be women's reservation. You know, it's a mirage. It's a carrot that keeps dangling. You've been told there'll be women's reservation, but no, you are not going to be beneficiaries of that. You keep waiting. When there will be a census, then there will be delimitation, and only after that will you have the opportunity to think about one-third reservation. And that is my problem with this. So it's safe to say here, it is perhaps not going to be a reality before 2034. 15 years from, the first mooting, it will not be a reality, and that's something that we need to ponder over. Can I go to the next slide, please? And I want to just spend, this is my last slide, I don't want to do any more numbers. We are a vote bank. Policies are made, and affirmative action, cosmetic women are put there. Policies are made, and you are explained, mansplained actually, and told how it's so good for women. Why don't you allow us to make our own policies? Why can't we decide what items need to be taxed and what don't? Why can't we decide what items must be imported into India and what must not? Why can't we decide what the excise on petroleum products will be? Are we any less intelligent than men around us? Are we not paying our fuel bills? We're doing all of that. And yet, when a woman gets elected, the first job, if you are part of the government, is she should be a minister in the Women and Child Development Department. Why? Why? I ask all of you, why? Why is women and child development a job of only us women? Why is it not a job of men? And unless and until it is not made to be a man's job, you will have women who will be raped in legislatures and in official cars. You will have women who will be at the receiving end of domestic violence. You will have women who will be at the receiving end of violence and exploitation at workplaces. And for that to change, there needs to be many, many more of us in Parliament making the policies that we want to make. I only want to end by saying, I guess I've exceeded my time, but I only want to end by saying, it's good to celebrate us. It's good to keep us safe, but don't put us on a pedestal because you want to keep us out. So when and if this does become a reality, we will see able women, we will see many more women come into policy making, and policy making done by a woman is far more effective because she understands the granularity of policy making and not the lofty generalities. And I will say one thing, because I represent the Congress party and I'm proud of the fact that my party changed its constitution in 2022 and ensured 50% reservation in positions of power and authority and office jobs for SC, ST, OBC, women and minorities. I'm proud of that fact. I am glad I represent a party which has given this country its first woman prime minister. I'm glad I represent a party which has given this country its first woman president. And these are not tokens. I mean, I think Professor Elizabeth referred to Srimati Indira Gandhi. You can love her, you can hate her, but you can't deny her of the fact that she was India's strongest prime minister ever, who could look America in the eye and say, I care two hoots, and divided Pakistan and gave birth to Bangladesh. She had the courage to nationalize banks when it was unheard of. She took the coterie away from India's financial and economic space and made it available to the people of this country. That requires courage. And again, I am not going to put us all on a pedestal and say, we have courage. We are perhaps more tensile, we are perhaps stronger, we perhaps carry more courage because of what society has done to us. All of you women, accomplished women here, lawyers, the fact that you broke some barriers and some glass ceilings is why you are here today. Is why you are a lawyer, is why you could read law, is why you could go to law schools, is why you're practicing law. And that makes us stronger. That makes us more tensile. Am I saying, are we better in jest? Of course we are better. But no, we are equal. And that's all that we ask you to do. And by equal, hang on. I don't mean that I can lift this table as well as a man can. This is not about physical strength. This is about mental, this is about moral, this is about strength of character. And just give us what is our due. And which is why I think women's reservation is an issue whose time has come. It should have been done in 2024 general elections, and which is why I do believe there's a dishonesty to the legislation that has been brought in. I do believe there needs to be provision made for the OBC. It's a start, but it's a start that should have been made in 2024. So let's remove the riders, let's put pressure, let's get these riders removed and make it a reality as soon as possible. Thank you very much for being a spirited audience. Thank you very much for being the women that you are. Thank you very much for being accomplished. Thank you very, very much for filling up this hall with all of you and not just men that we see around. I am not a man basher. I love men in my life. I have male friends, but I do believe when I speak to them and when I interact with them, I am no less than them. I am their equal, and that's the equation that all of us should have with men all around us. Thank you very much.